Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Confederation research ship Horizon and watched the dead world spin slowly below them. The planet had no name in any Confederation database, but the old star charts called it Terra 7. 300 years of galactic peace had made people forget why anyone would build a military outpost in such a remote place, but Jake had a feeling he was about to find out. The crystalline being beside him made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Quixandra was the ship's chief scientist, and her species, the Veltar, were known for their perfect memory and love of ancient stories. She had been telling Jake about the human myths all morning while they approached the planet. The tales speak of warriors who fought with metal sticks that shot tiny projectiles, she said in her musical voice. They wore armor made of simple materials but never retreated from any battle. Some stories claim they could survive in any environment and heal from wounds that would kill other species. Jake's engineer Vorth made a dismissive sound from his station. The Nethys existed as living gas clouds inside mechanical suits, and Vorth had little patience for what he called primitive folklore. His voice came through speakers in his suit with electronic distortion. Impossible biology. Vorth said, "No species evolves such adaptability. The stories are entertainment for younglings, nothing more." Jake had heard these debates before. Every species in the Confederation had human myths passed down through generations. The Veltar remembered them as great warriors. The Zephyrians spoke of them as chaos bringers who disrupted the natural order. The Nethys described them as emotional creatures who made decisions based on feelings rather than logic. Despite the different perspectives, all the stories agreed on one thing. Humans had vanished from known space 200 years ago without explanation. The orbital scans had detected artificial structures on the planet's surface, so Jake ordered the landing party to prepare. He would take Quixandra and 2 security officers down to investigate, while Vorth remained on the ship to monitor their progress. The shuttle ride through the thin atmosphere was quiet, except for the sound of recycled air and humming engines. The outpost was larger than expected. Metal buildings rose from rocky ground in a pattern that made no tactical sense to Jake's trained eye. Confederation military doctrine emphasized efficiency and logical placement, but these structures seemed designed around different principles. Wide spaces between buildings allowed for movement but also created defensive gaps that any competent enemy could exploit. Quixandra immediately began scanning everything with her portable equipment while the security officers established a perimeter. Jake walked toward the largest building and found the entrance had been sealed with some kind of polymer foam that had hardened over time. His plasma cutter made quick work of the barrier, and soon they were inside what appeared to be a command center. The technology was unlike anything Jake had seen before. Control panels used physical switches and buttons instead of neural interfaces. Display screens showed information in a written language that Confederation translation systems could not decode. Most interesting were the weapons stored in wall-mounted racks. They appeared to be kinetic projectile launchers, but the materials were strange alloys that his scanner could not identify. Commander Morrison, Quixandra called from across the room. "You need to see this." She stood before a large display screen that had somehow activated when she approached. Images flashed across the surface showing battles between different species. Jake recognized Zephyrian bioships and Veltar crystal formations, but there were other vessels he did not know. Long, sleek ships that moved with aggressive purpose and fired weapons that seemed to tear through enemy defenses with ease. The power source should be dead after 2 centuries, Quixandra said with wonder in her voice. But the system responded to my biosignature as if it had been waiting. More images appeared. Soldiers in armor that shifted color and texture to match their surroundings. Vehicles that could apparently function in space or on planetary surfaces without modification. Most striking were the faces visible through helmet visors. They looked similar to several Confederation species, but with subtle differences that made Jake uncomfortable. "For reasons he could not explain, sir," one of the security officers called from outside, "we found something else." Jake and Quixandra joined him at what appeared to be a memorial wall. Names were carved into the metal surface in the same unknown script they had seen inside. Below the names were symbols that might have been rank insignia or unit markers. At the bottom of the wall, fresh flowers had been placed recently enough that they had not completely wilted. "Someone has been here," Jake said quietly. "These flowers are maybe 3 days old at most." Vorth's voice crackled through their communicators with urgency. "Commander, you need to return to the ship immediately. I'm detecting multiple contacts approaching our position. Jake looked up to see dark shapes descending through the thin clouds. The ships were unlike any Confederation design, with angular hulls and weapon ports that glowed with contained energy. As they watched, one of the ships broke away from the formation and landed near the memorial wall. The landing was so smooth and precise that Jake barely heard the engines shut down. A door opened in the side of the landed ship, and 3 figures emerged. They wore the same adaptive armor from the old recordings, but their weapons were clearly advanced beyond anything Confederation forces possessed. The leader removed their helmet, revealing features that matched the faces Jake had seen on the command center displays. The being looked human according to all the old descriptions, but there were differences. Slightly denser bone structure visible in the facial features, eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the surroundings with predatory focus, movement patterns that suggested enhanced reflexes and physical capability. This was what the myths had described, but seeing it in person made Jake realize the stories had understated rather than exaggerated. "You are not Zephyrian," the human said in perfect Confederation standard. The voice carried authority and barely controlled anger. "Why are you here?" Jake stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible and empty. First contact protocols had been drilled into every Confederation officer, but none of them covered what to do when meeting a supposedly mythical species. "I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Confederation research vessel Horizon," he said. "We detected artificial structures and came to investigate. We mean no harm to you or your people." The human studied Jake's face for a long moment, then looked at Quixandra and the security officers. Something in their expression shifted from suspicion to curiosity when they saw the mixed species composition of the group Confederation. The human repeated slowly, "The stories say your organization expelled us from known space 2 centuries ago. Yet you travel with Veltar and your ship carries Nethys energy signatures. Much has changed, it seems." Before Jake could respond, Vorth's voice burst through the communicators again. "Commander, multiple Zephyrian bioships are entering the system. They appear to be pursuing the human vessels." The human leader's expression hardened immediately. They spoke rapidly into their own communicator in a language that Jake's translator could not decode. The other 2 humans moved toward their ship with practiced efficiency, while more ships descended from orbit. "Commander Morrison," the human said, "if you wish to live, you will leave this place now. The Zephyrians have found us again, and this planet will become a battlefield within the hour." Jake made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating to safety, he stepped closer to the human leader. "We have advanced medical facilities and defensive capabilities," he said. "If you are fighting the Zephyrians, then perhaps we can help each other." The human's eyes widened slightly, as if Jake had said something completely unexpected. For a moment, the mask of military composure slipped, and Jake saw something else underneath. Hope mixed with disbelief and a desperate need to trust someone after what must have been years of isolation. "You would stand with us against the hive mind?" the human asked. "Even though you do not know us?" The Confederation was founded on the principle that all thinking beings deserve freedom. Jake replied, "If the Zephyrians are your enemy, then they are ours as well." The human leader smiled for the first time and extended their hand in an ancient gesture of greeting that Jake somehow recognized. "I am Captain Ryan Baker," they said. "Welcome to the war that history forgot." Dr. Lisa Carter pressed her face against the observation window of the Confederation science vessel Discovery and watched the human ships move through space with impossible grace. 3 months had passed since Commander Morrison's first contact report reached Confederation headquarters, and Lisa had volunteered immediately for the cultural exchange mission. As one of the few humans living in Confederation space, she understood better than anyone what this discovery meant. The human fleet consisted of 12 vessels ranging from small fighters to massive battleships, but they all shared the same aggressive design philosophy. Sharp angles and heavy armor gave them a predatory appearance that made Lisa's pulse quicken with something between pride and fear. These ships had been built for war in a way that Confederation vessels never were. Dr. Carter called Captain Martinez from the bridge. "We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." Lisa hurried to the communication station, where the main screen showed a woman in military uniform. The human officer had the same enhanced features Lisa had read about in Morrison's reports, but her expression was more diplomatic than the warriors who had first made contact. This is General Patricia Hayes commanding the human Colonial Defense Force, the woman said. We appreciate the Confederation's offer of medical supplies and technical assistance. However, I must warn you that our current position is extremely dangerous. Captain Martinez gestured for Lisa to respond. As the mission's cultural specialist and the only human aboard Discovery, she had become the default spokesperson for all human-related communications.
General Hayes, this is Dr. Lisa Carter, she said. I'm honored to meet
Another human after so many years. My people have lived peacefully within the Confederation for generations. We want to help you however we can. The general's expression shifted to something Lisa could not quite identify. Surprise mixed with suspicion and perhaps a touch of sadness, Dr. Carter. I'm not sure you understand what we have become. Hayes said, your people chose integration and peace. We have spent 2 centuries learning to fight and survive in the void between stars. We may share common ancestors, but we are very different now. Before Lisa could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the Discovery. Captain Martinez barked orders as his crew rushed to battle stations. The main screen switched to tactical display showing multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system, Zephyrian bioships. Martinez announced grimly, a full hunting pack by the look of it. Lisa had never seen Zephyrian military vessels in person, but the creatures on screen matched her worst fears. Living ships that pulsed with organic rhythm and bristled with weapon pods that looked like infected wounds in flesh. The largest bioship was the size of a small moon, and its approach made space itself seem to recoil. Discovery, you need to withdraw immediately, General Hayes said urgently. Your vessel is not equipped for this kind of combat. We're not abandoning you, Captain Martinez replied with determination. The Confederation doesn't leave allies behind. Lisa watched in fascination as the human fleet began to move. What had seemed like random positioning suddenly revealed itself as a carefully planned formation. The smaller ships spread out in a pattern that would maximize their fire coverage, while the larger vessels moved to protect. Discovery and the other Confederation ships that had arrived over the past weeks, Dr. Carter, Hayes said privately on a secure channel. I need you to understand something. What you are about to see may disturb you. We have adapted our tactics to fight an enemy that outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. Sometimes we must make choices that your people might find barbaric. The first exchange of fire lit up space with colors Lisa had never imagined. Zephyrian bioweapons launched projectiles that seemed to be alive, writhing through space toward their targets. Human ships responded with precise energy bursts that carved through Zephyrian armor with surgical accuracy, but it was the human tactics that truly amazed her. Where Confederation doctrine emphasized defensive formations and minimal casualties, the humans fought with calculated aggression. They used the Confederation ships as bait, drawing Zephyrian forces into vulnerable positions before striking from unexpected angles. When one human vessel took damage, instead of retreating, it accelerated directly toward the nearest bioship and detonated its reactor in a blast that destroyed both vessels. They're using ramming attacks, Captain Martinez said with horror. That's suicide, no, Lisa whispered, understanding something the others missed. It's sacrifice. She had studied human mythology and history during her academic career. The stories spoke of warriors who would give their lives to protect others and cultures that valued honor above survival. Seeing it happen in space combat made those old tales suddenly real in a way that academic study never could. The battle continued for 3 hours, with neither side gaining clear advantage. Zephyrian bioships regenerated damage almost as quickly as the humans could inflict it, while human vessels used superior maneuverability to avoid the worst of enemy fire. Lisa began to understand why this war had continued for 2 centuries without resolution. Then something changed. A new group of human ships appeared on the edge of the battle, moving in a formation Lisa recognized from ancient military texts. They were executing a pincer movement that would trap the Zephyrian forces between 2 groups of enemies. Impossible. Captain Martinez muttered. Those ships came from inside the asteroid field. The gravitational stresses should have torn them apart. The Void Runners, General Hayes said with pride in her voice. Our most elite pilots. They can navigate spaces that would kill anyone else. The new arrivals struck the Zephyrian formation from behind with devastating effect. Bioships that had seemed invincible moments before began to break apart under coordinated fire from multiple directions. The largest creature tried to escape, but human fighters swarmed around it like angry insects delivering precise strikes to vital systems. When the battle ended, 12 Zephyrian bioships had been destroyed or disabled, while human losses numbered only 3 vessels. Lisa stared at the tactical display, trying to process what she had witnessed. This was not the random violence of primitive warriors, but the calculated efficiency of a military force that had perfected the art of war. Dr. Carter, General Hayes, appeared on screen again. I would like to invite you aboard our flagship. There are things you need to see if you truly want to help us. The shuttle ride to the human vessel Retribution gave Lisa time to think about what she had learned. These humans were not the peaceful farmers and scholars she had grown up with in Confederation space. They were something new created by centuries of warfare and isolation, yet they were still recognizably human in ways that mattered. The Retribution's interior was functional rather than comfortable, with corridors designed for rapid movement during combat situations. Human crew members nodded respectfully as Lisa passed, but she could see the curiosity in their eyes. She was probably the first Confederation human they had ever encountered. General Hayes met her in a conference room that overlooked the ship's main hangar. Through the transparent walls, Lisa could see pilots and technicians working on damaged fighters with efficient precision. Everyone moved with purpose, and there was no wasted motion or casual conversation. "Welcome aboard, Doctor," Hayes said, gesturing to a chair. "I want you to understand what we're fighting for before you decide whether the Confederation truly wants to help us." The general activated a holographic display that showed star maps dating back 2 centuries. Lisa recognized the Confederation's expansion patterns, but there were details she had never seen before. Entire systems marked as uninhabitable that showed signs of recent Zephyrian occupation. Trade routes that had been mysteriously abandoned with no official explanation. The Zephyrians have been expanding for 300 years, Hayes explained. They use the Confederation as a shield while they consume worlds in the outer reaches. Your people believe they are peaceful because they only show you their diplomatic face. More images appeared showing Zephyrian bioships attacking civilian colonies and harvesting entire populations for their hive mind collective. Lisa felt sick as she realized the implications. The Confederation's peaceful coexistence with the Zephyrians was only possible because humanity had been secretly fighting them in the darkness between stars. Why? Didn't you contact the Confederation for help? Lisa asked. Surely our combined forces could have ended this war. Hayes smiled sadly. We tried, Doctor. 2 centuries ago, human ambassadors pleaded for assistance. The Confederation's response was to declare us a destabilizing influence and demand our withdrawal from known space. We were given a choice. Submit to Zephyrian integration or face exile. That's impossible, Lisa protested. The Confederation would never. Your people chose integration, Hayes said gently. They became part of Confederation society and forgot their warrior heritage. We chose exile and preserved what it means to be human. Both choices were valid, but only one of them prepared us for what was coming. Lisa stared at the tactical displays showing the true scope of the conflict. Hundreds of human colonies hidden in the void between stars, all dedicated to the single purpose of holding back an enemy that the rest of the galaxy did not even know existed. What do you need from us? She asked quietly. Chancellor Thaes stood in the great assembly hall of Nexus Prime and felt the weight of 3 centuries crashing down around her. The emergency session had been called after Dr. Carter's shocking revelations about the Zephyrian deception, but even now, with proof displayed on every screen, many representatives refused to believe what they were seeing. Impossible, declared Ambassador Veltoth of the Zephyrian delegation. We have been partners in peace for generations. These accusations are clearly fabricated by a species known for violence and deception. General Patricia Hayes stood calmly at the center of the assembly hall, wearing dress uniform that somehow made her look more dangerous than battle armor would have. Behind her, holographic displays showed 2 centuries of Zephyrian expansion into Confederation space through methods that had been hidden from all other species, Ambassador Veltoth. Hayes said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast room, your delegation arrived here aboard bioships that show clear weapon modifications. Our scans detected at least 40 combat variants among your so-called diplomatic fleet. Jake Morrison stepped forward from his position with the Confederation security detail. 3 months of working with human forces had changed him in ways that other officers found disturbing. His movements had gained an edge, and his eyes held a wariness that came from seeing too much combat. "Chancellor Theiss," he said formally, "I can confirm General Hayes's assessment. The Zephyrian ships currently in orbit are military vessels disguised as civilian transports. Our own sensors detected the deception once we knew what to look for." The Veltar representative Quixmora made her musical chiming sound that indicated deep concern. As the Confederation's chief historian, she had spent weeks studying the evidence that Dr. Carter and the human forces had provided. The timeline matches unexplored gaps in our historical records, she admitted reluctantly. Entire sectors that were declared uninhabitable during the same period that humans reportedly vanished from known space. Forth's mechanical suit hissed as he adjusted internal pressure to express agitation. The Nethys engineer had been analyzing captured Zephyrian technology, and his findings had disturbed him greatly. "The bioships use materials harvested from living beings," he reported in his electronic voice. "The neural networks show signs of forced integration with multiple species consciousness patterns. This is not evolution. This is consumption." Ambassador Veltoth's form shifted subtly as individual Zephyrian units within the hive mind collective began to move with more aggressive postures. The change was barely visible, but General Hayes noticed it immediately. "Chancellor, I recommend you order all Zephyrian vessels to withdraw from Confederation space immediately," Hayes said. "They are preparing for coordinated action." Before Chancellor Theiss could respond, every screen in the assembly hall flashed red as emergency alerts flooded the communication networks. Captain Steve Collins of the Human Marine Forces burst through the main doors with his full squad in combat armor. "General, the Zephyrians just launched simultaneous attacks on 12 Confederation worlds," he reported grimly. "Bioships that were supposedly on peaceful missions have begun orbital bombardments." The assembly hall erupted in chaos as representatives from attacked worlds tried to contact their home systems, while others demanded explanations from the Zephyrian delegation. Ambassador Veltoth stood motionless for a moment, then began to speak in a voice that contained harmonics from dozens of individual beings. "The time for deception has ended," the collective consciousness said. "The Confederation has served its purpose as a shield while we prepared for expansion. Your species will be integrated or eliminated as efficiency demands." General Hayes moved with lightning speed, drawing a weapon that most Confederation citizens had never seen before. The projectile launcher fired physical rounds that tore through Zephyrian bioarmor with devastating effect. Ambassador Veltoth collapsed as the individual units that comprised the collective consciousness began to separate and flee. "Security teams to the assembly hall immediately," Chancellor Theiss commanded, while Hayes and her Marines established defensive positions around the remaining delegates. "Chancellor, the Zephyrian fleet in orbit is powering weapons," Jake Morrison reported from his communication station. "They have us surrounded and outgunned 10-1 through the massive windows that overlooked Nexus Prime's capital city." Everyone could see the dark shapes of bioships descending through the atmosphere. The vessels pulsed with organic light and deployed weapons that looked like infected wounds opening in flesh. "How long until Confederation defense fleets arrive?" Chancellor Theiss asked desperately. 6 hours minimum," Jake replied. "The Zephyrians timed this perfectly. Our main forces are scattered across the border systems." General Hayes spoke rapidly into her personal communicator, using the same untranslatable language that Dr. Carter had heard during first contact. Within moments, the sky above Nexus Prime filled with new ships as human forces emerged from hyperspace in formations that defied everything. Confederation tacticians thought they knew about fleet deployment, General Hayes, Chancellor Theiss, said with amazement. "How did you get so many ships here so quickly? We've been preparing for this moment for 2 centuries, Hayes replied while coordinating defensive positions. "Every human colony has been ready to respond to Zephyrian aggression anywhere in the galaxy within hours." The battle for Nexus Prime began with orbital bombardment, as Zephyrian bioships tried to destroy the planet's government centers, while human vessels intercepted them with precise counterattacks. Lisa Carter watched from the assembly hall's observation deck as space above the capital became a maze of energy weapons and exploding ships. Dr. Carter called Commander Amy Foster over the communication system. We need immediate translation assistance. The Zephyrians are using frequency patterns we haven't encountered before. Lisa had worked with Confederation xenolinguistics departments for years, but listening to raw Zephyrian collective communication was like hearing the screams of 1,000 beings forced into artificial unity. The patterns were mathematical rather than linguistic, expressing concepts through harmonic relationships that hurt to process. They're coordinating a planet-wide assault, she reported after several minutes of analysis. Every bioship is receiving individual targeting data for maximum efficiency. Captain Ryan Baker's voice joined the communication network from his ship, high above the planet. All human units, this is Baker Actual. Execute plan Hammerfall. Repeat, execute Hammerfall. Lisa watched in fascination as human tactics unfolded with deadly precision. Instead of meeting Zephyrian forces in direct combat, the human fleet used hit-and-run attacks to disrupt bioship formations, while ground forces led by Captain Steve Collins secured strategic positions throughout the capital city. They're not trying to win the battle, Jake Morrison observed with growing understanding. They're buying time for something else, General. Hayes smiled grimly while coordinating defensive fire from her position in the assembly hall. Dr. Carter, I need you to establish communication with every Confederation world simultaneously. What I'm about to show them will change everything. The main display screens throughout the hall activated, showing real-time feeds from human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Hundreds of worlds that Confederation surveys had declared uninhabitable were revealed to be thriving centers of human civilization. Each colony was heavily fortified and defended by fleets that rivaled the Confederation's main battle groups. For 2 centuries, we have built a civilization dedicated to one purpose, Hayes announced as her voice was broadcast across Confederation space. We have become what the galaxy needs us to be. Guardians, protectors, the shield that stands between order and chaos. More displays showed the true scope of human expansion. Secret bases hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae. Mobile shipyards that could construct entire fleets while moving between star systems. Most impressive were the defensive networks that had held back Zephyrian expansion for generations, through pure determination and tactical brilliance. The Confederation believed in peace through diplomacy. Hayes continued, We believe in peace through strength. Both philosophies have merit, but only one of them can stop what's coming. The Zephyrian assault on Nexus Prime was failing, as human reinforcements continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Bioships that had seemed invincible began to withdraw, as their collective consciousness calculated that victory was no longer achievable at acceptable cost. This is just the beginning, Hayes warned, as the immediate threat began to recede. The Zephyrians have revealed themselves, but they still control vast territories and countless resources. The real war starts now. Chancellor Theiss looked around the assembly hall at representatives from dozens of species who were seeing human military capability for the first time. The myths and legends suddenly seemed inadequate to describe what they had witnessed. General Hayes, she said formally, the Confederation of Worlds requests formal alliance with the human colonial forces. We accept that our previous policies were based on incomplete information. Hayes nodded respectfully. Chancellor, we accept your alliance, but there are conditions. This will not be the clean war that your people prefer. We will need to teach your forces tactics that may seem brutal by Confederation standards. What kind of tactics? Jake Morrison asked. The war erupted across 1,000 worlds as Zephyrian biofleets abandoned all pretense of peaceful coexistence and revealed their true strength. What the Confederation had believed to be diplomatic missions turned out to be advance invasion. Forces positioned to strike at the heart of galactic civilization. Within days of the attack on Nexus Prime, entire star systems went silent as living ships consumed everything in their path. Colonel Danny Roberts crouched behind rubble that had once been a Veltar crystal garden and watched Zephyrian biotroops advance through the ruins of Harmony Station. The Confederation's most important trade hub had become a battlefield where human Marines fought alongside alien security forces who had never seen combat before. The enemy moved like a single organism, because that was exactly what they were. Thousands of individual Zephyrian units connected by neural links that allowed perfect coordination. "Roberts, this is Base Command," came the voice of General Hayes through his communicator. "How are the Veltar civilians handling evacuation procedures?" Danny glanced at the crystal beings who were trying to carry their wounded to safety, while bio troops hunted them through the station's corridors. The Veltar had lived in peace for centuries, and their natural reaction to violence was to seek harmony rather than fight back. It was getting them killed. They don't understand that running away just makes them easier targets. Danny replied while directing his squad to new firing positions. "We need to teach them basic combat psychology fast, or they'll all be dead within the hour." "Understood, Colonel." Dr. Carter is working with Confederation Command to establish rapid training protocols for civilian populations. Danny's Marines opened fire as Zephyrian forces tried to flank their position. The bio troops moved with inhuman coordination, but human. Tactics had been designed to counter exactly this kind of enemy. 2 centuries of warfare had taught humanity that defeating a hive mind required disrupting their communication networks and forcing individual units to act independently. "Sergeant Tony Martin, get me a signal jammer on that biocluster," Danny ordered, pointing to a group of Zephyrian units that were moving in perfect formation. Tony was the squad's technical specialist, and he had adapted Confederation technology to work with human weapons in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. His improvised jammer sent electromagnetic pulses that interfered with Zephyrian neural links, causing individual bio troops to stumble and lose coordination. "That's beautiful work, Marine," Danny said as the enemy formation began to collapse. "Now, let's show these civilians how to fight." Quixandra and 12 other Veltar had taken shelter in what remained of the station's medical center. Their crystalline forms could survive in hostile environments, but they had no natural weapons, and their peaceful nature made them reluctant to harm other beings, even in self-defense. "Honored Quixandra," Danny said, approaching them carefully. "I need you and your people to help us save the station. Can you do that?" The Veltar scientist looked at the human colonel with confusion in her musical voice. "We are not warriors, Colonel Roberts. Our species has never engaged in violence. Today you need to learn," Danny replied firmly but gently. "The Zephyrians won't show mercy because you're peaceful. They see you as resources to be harvested. You can choose to fight or you can choose to die, but those are the only options." He handed Quixandra a simple projectile weapon that had been modified for Veltar physiology. The crystal being held it awkwardly, as if touching something unclean. "I cannot take life," she said. "It violates everything my people believe." "Then don't think about taking life," Danny said. "Think about protecting life. Every Zephyrian unit you stop is a dozen civilians who get to evacuate safely." The sound of bio troops approaching through the medical center's corridors made the decision for them. Quixandra raised the weapon with trembling hands as her people prepared to defend themselves for the first time in their species' history. Meanwhile, in space above Harmony Station, Lieutenant Sarah Phillips led her fighter squadron through a maze of bioships that seemed to fill every cubic meter of local space. The Zephyrians had committed everything to this assault, including biotitans that were larger than most Confederation space stations. "Phoenix Leader, this is Phoenix 3, came the voice of her wingman over the communication system. "I count 47 bioships in close formation. Recommend we withdraw and wait for reinforcements." Sarah smiled as she watched the enemy fleet maneuver with typical Zephyrian efficiency. They moved as one organism, which made them predictable once you understood their patterns. "Negative Phoenix 3, she replied. "We're going to give them a lesson in human tactics. All fighters execute Pattern Delta 7 on my mark." Pattern Delta 7 was a maneuver that Confederation pilots considered impossible. It required flying through overlapping fields of enemy fire, while maintaining formation tight enough that bioship targeting systems could not distinguish between individual fighters. The human pilots had practiced it for months until they could execute it by pure instinct. "Phoenix Leader, are you insane?" called another pilot. "That pattern has a 90% casualty rate according to Confederation simulations." Confederation simulations assume pilots who value their own lives more than the mission. Sarah replied calmly. "We are not Confederation pilots. Execute on my mark." Mark. 12 human fighters dove into the heart of the Zephyrian formation, moving so close together that their energy shields created interference patterns that confused bioship sensors. The enemy fired frantically, but their weapons could not track targets that moved with such precision through chaotic space. Sarah's fighter emerged from the formation's center and launched missiles at the largest bio-titan, while her squadron scattered to attack individual targets. The Zephyrian vessels tried to respond, but their hive-mind coordination worked against them as they interfered with each other's movements. Phoenix Leader. "This is incredible," called her wingman. "How did you know they would react that way?" "Because I've been studying them for 20 years, Sarah replied while evading return fire. The hive mind is their strength, but it's also their weakness. They can't adapt to tactics that don't follow logical patterns. Back on Harmony Station, Colonel Danny Roberts watched Quixandra fire her weapon for the first time as Zephyrian biotroops burst into the medical center. The crystal being's first shot went wide, but her second found its target, dropping a bio unit that had been advancing on wounded civilians. "I have taken life," Quixandra said in horror. "I have violated the harmony of existence." "You have preserved life," Danny corrected her, while his Marines engaged the remaining biotroops. "Look around you. Every person in this room is alive because you chose to fight." The battle for Harmony Station continued for 18 hours, as human forces demonstrated tactics that Confederation military academies had never imagined. They used the station's own systems against the invaders, turning life support networks into weapons and medical equipment into improvised explosives. Engineer Tony Martin had connected Confederation computers to human combat algorithms, creating hybrid systems that could predict Zephyrian movements while adapting to changing battlefield conditions. When biotroops tried to use their numerical advantage, Tony's systems redirected them into kill zones where human weapons could engage them at maximum effectiveness. Colonel Roberts. Tony reported from his mobile command post. "I've got good news."
"And bad news. Give me the bad news first, Marine. The Zephyrians have bioships moving to reinforce this position."
3 bio-titans and maybe 50 smaller vessels. And the good news, General Hayes just arrived with the entire human colonial fleet. She wants to know if you need assistance with evacuation. Danny looked around the medical center where Veltar. Civilians were now working alongside human Marines to treat wounded and maintain defensive positions. Quixandra had become an effective soldier while maintaining her gentle nature, and her people were learning that fighting could be an act of compassion rather than violence. "Tell the General we have everything under control," Danny replied. "But she might want to watch this. The Confederation species are about to show the galaxy what they can do when they stop being afraid." Above them, Sarah Phillips led her fighter squadron in one final attack on the approaching bio-titans. The massive living ships launched clouds of biofighters, but human tactics had evolved specifically to counter overwhelming numerical odds. "All fighters, this is Phoenix Leader," Sarah announced. "Execute final protocol. It has been an honor serving with you." The human fighters accelerated directly toward the largest bio-titan, while broadcasting the evacuation complete signal on all frequencies. They had bought enough time for every civilian to escape, and now they would ensure the Zephyrian fleet could not pursue them. But instead of ramming attacks, the fighters pulled up at the last second and released their entire missile payload at point-blank range. The bio-titan's armor could not withstand such concentrated firepower, and the massive creature began to break apart as its biosystems failed. "Phoenix Leader, how did you survive that attack?" called ground control in amazement. "Simple," Sarah replied, as her damaged fighter limped toward the nearest human ship. "I learned from the best teachers in the galaxy. Humans who refuse to give up no matter how bad the odds look." The Nexus Gate stood at the heart of Confederation space like a massive ring of metal and energy that connected a dozen star systems through hyperspace corridors. For 3 centuries, it had been the symbol of galactic unity and peaceful cooperation. But now it served as the final battleground where 2 different visions of the future would clash. General Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, Retribution, and watched the largest Zephyrian fleet in recorded history emerge from hyperspace like a living nightmare made manifest. "General, the bio-titans are the size of moons," reported Captain Ryan Baker from his position with the Advance. "Scouts, I count at least 20 of them plus support. Fleets that number in the thousands? Hayes studied the tactical displays showing enemy forces that stretched across light years of space. Each bio-titan was a living creature bred for war with weapon systems that could sterilize entire planets. The smaller bioships moved around, them like antibodies protecting a massive organism that had come to consume everything in its path, all human. Forces, this is Hayes Actual, she announced on the fleet-wide communication network. Today we end a war that has lasted 2 centuries. Every colony, every ship, every warrior who has ever stood against the darkness has led to this moment. Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated Confederation forces from the space station that controlled the Nexus Gate itself. 3 months of intensive training with human military advisors had transformed Confederation officers into something their predecessors would not have recognized. They had learned that sometimes peace required violence and that survival demanded sacrifice. General Hayes' Confederation fleet reports ready for combat, Jake announced. All species represented and all crews trained in human tactical doctrine. Outstanding, Admiral. Hayes replied. Execute Plan Omega. All forces engage at will. The battle began with long-range fire as bioships launched living projectiles that sought their targets with predatory intelligence. Confederation vessels responded with precise energy bursts while human ships used kinetic weapons that could penetrate bioarmor through sheer impact force. Space around the Nexus Gate became a maze of explosions and debris as 2 civilizations fought for the right to exist. Commander Amy Foster led her Void Runner squadron through the chaos with maneuvers that defied every law of physics. Confederation scientists thought they understood. Her pilots had learned to navigate gravitational anomalies and space-time distortions that would destroy normal ships, but their enhanced vessels thrived in the impossible conditions. Void Leader, this is Void 7, called one of her pilots. I have a clear approach to Bio-Titan Primary. Requesting permission to engage. Negative, Void 7. Amy replied while dodging weapons fire that could have vaporized her entire squadron. Stay with the formation. We're going to hit them all at once. The Void Runners had spent years perfecting attacks that used the Nexus Gate's own energy fields as weapons. They could channel hyperspace radiation through their ship systems to create projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It was technology that should have been impossible, but human engineering had made it real through pure determination. On the space station itself, Colonel Danny Roberts coordinated ground defenses as Zephyrian boarding pods began to impact against the outer hull. The biotroops that emerged were larger and more aggressive than anything human forces had encountered before. These were elite units bred specifically to capture the gate and use its power to coordinate the final conquest of Confederation space. All Marines, this is Roberts, he announced while directing fire teams to critical positions. The enemy has committed everything to taking this station. We hold here or the entire galaxy falls. Quixandra moved through the station's corridors with confidence that would have amazed her people 6 months earlier. The Veltar scientist had become a deadly combatant, while maintaining the gentle nature that defined her species. She carried weapons designed specifically for Crystal, being physiology and her tactical skills rivaled those of human veterans. Colonel Roberts, she reported, from her position near the gate's control center. Zephyrian biotroops are attempting to access the primary power systems. If they succeed, they can redirect energy to their fleet. Not happening, Danny replied. Tony, get me explosive charges on every critical system. If we can't hold the station, we'll make sure nobody else can use it. Sergeant Tony Martin had become a master of improvised warfare during months of fighting alongside Confederation allies. His latest creation combined human demolition techniques with Veltar crystalline technology to produce explosives that could destroy bioarmor at the molecular level. Charges are set, Colonel, he reported, but I've got something better. The station's power core can be overloaded to create a hyperspace cascade that will take out half the Zephyrian fleet. What's the blast radius? Danny asked. Everything within 3 light years. Tony replied grimly, including us in space. Above them, Lieutenant Sarah Phillips led the final fighter assault against the largest bio-titan as human and Confederation. Squadrons worked together with coordination that seemed impossible given their different flying styles. The Veltar pilots moved with crystalline precision, while Nethys fighters flowed like living gas through enemy formations. Human tactics bound them together into a force that was greater than the sum of its parts. All fighters, this is Phoenix Leader, Sarah announced. The Bio-Titan is preparing to fire its main weapon at the gate. We have one chance to stop it. The massive creature's weapon was a biological structure that could channel pure life energy into a beam capable of destroying entire star systems. It was preparing to fire directly at the Nexus gate, knowing that the station's destruction would cripple Confederation resistance throughout the galaxy. Phoenix leader. The approach vector is suicide, called her Veltar Wingman. No fighter can survive that much. Concentrated firepower. Then we don't survive. Sarah replied simply, we succeed. 30 fighters from 3 different species accelerated toward the Bio-Titan's weapon array, knowing that none of them would return. They moved in perfect formation despite fundamental differences in their technology and physiology, because human leadership had taught them that survival was less important than purpose. Dr. Lisa Carter watched the battle from the gate's command center and felt pride mixed with grief as she understood what was happening. Every species in the Confederation was learning what it meant to be human. Not the peaceful farmers and scholars who had integrated into galactic society, but the warriors who stood watch in the darkness, protecting everything they held dear. Dr. Carter called General Hayes from her flagship as the battle reached its climax. I need you to broadcast a message to every world in Confederation space. What kind of message, General? The truth about what we're fighting for. Hayes replied, not conquest or dominion, but the right of every thinking being to choose their own destiny. Lisa activated the communication systems that would carry her words to billions of beings across the galaxy. Citizens of the Confederation of Worlds, she began. Today you witness the end of one age and the beginning of another. For centuries we believed that peace could be maintained through diplomacy and good intentions. We have learned that sometimes peace requires warriors willing to fight for it. The Bio-Titan's weapon began to charge as Sarah Phillips and her squadron approached through fields of defensive fire that turned space itself into a maze of death. One by one, fighters disappeared in explosions of light, but the survivors pressed forward because retreat was not an option. The humans who fought in exile for 2 centuries were not abandoned by the galaxy. Lisa continued, they became its guardians. They chose to stand between order and chaos so that the rest of us could live in peace. Today that choice has made them legendary. Sarah's fighter was the last to survive the approach to the Bio-Titan's weapon array. Her ship was damaged beyond repair, and her life support systems were failing, but she had 1 missile left and a clear shot at the creature's most vulnerable point. Phoenix. Leader to all stations, she announced calmly. Target is locked. Firing now. The missile struck the Bio-Titan's weapon array at the exact moment it tried to fire, creating a chain reaction that tore through the massive creature's biosystems. The explosion was visible from a dozen star systems as the largest Zephyrian vessel ever constructed destroyed itself in a burst of uncontrolled energy. Colonel Danny Roberts felt the space station shake as the Bio-Titan's destruction sent shockwaves through hyperspace. Tony, now would be a good time for that cascade weapon. Already on it, Colonel, Tony replied as he initiated the overload sequence, station evacuation in 30 seconds, but instead of evacuating, Danny and his Marines held their positions as Zephyrian biotroops made one final assault on the Gates Control Center. They had learned from human example that some things were worth dying. For all Confederation forces, this is Admiral Morrison, came Jake's voice over the communication network. Human. Colonial Fleet reports Zephyrian command ship disabled. Enemy forces are beginning to withdraw. The battle for the Nexus Gate ended not with a climactic explosion, but with the quiet realization that the Zephyrian hive mind had finally encountered something it could not understand. An enemy that fought not for territory or resources, but for principles that transcended individual survival.